Restart. Right. Uh, and I'm going to share the latest budget draft that we got that Susie shared with us, which I think is dated January 16th. Everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
All right. So I think, Caitlin, I think the way we've done this, I think the last couple of years is we've sort of had you just kind of do like a high level overview of the budget and kind of, just giving us context, the information about any kind of significant changes from the previous year or any sort of important issues that you want to flag for our attention. Does that work for you?
Yes, that works for me.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to kind of scroll through your draft here, and maybe we can start with this budget summary.
Sure. So the budget summary is everything compiled together, and the reason why you'll see the revenue sources appearing as zero is because we have under kind of DESI guidance and what makes most sense in transparency, removed the grants and the revolving funds from the budget. So what you're seeing is just what the budget summary is for the appropriations for the town of Shutesbury. So it's our general operating budget. It does not include any grants. It does include our revolving funds. So we're in a bit of an awkward year of getting to that point. And then next year, moving on, you will just see it as you've seen it before, but just with the grants and revolving funds in a different page continuing on.
All right. So just to be clear, so what we're seeing here is the portion of the school's budget that is being spent on budget lines that are associated with the town's appropriation. And then later in this presentation, there's a set of planned expenses that are the proposal is to pay for those through grants and other revenue sources, not related to the town's appropriation. Do I have that right?
Yes, so they're all pulled out. You'll see the school choice spending and other spending in a different page.
Okay.
So this is just what the town appropriations, what our operating budget is.
Okay, got it. All right, and so bottom line here is that we're looking at a 5% increase in our town's proposed appropriation from FY25 to FY26. Before we look at like the detailed budget, is there anything you want to alert us to in terms of kind of what some of the biggest drivers of that increase are?
No, we can get to those in the presentation portion. I'll identify them by their accounts, and then if we can go back to this page if you'd like to, then it kind of summarizes everything that I'm about to share.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to move on then. Okay, so this slide looks like it actually gives the kind of larger picture of all proposed spending, including the town appropriation, and then grants, rural aid, and school choice.
Yes, this is our total funding with everything included, the town appropriations, the school choice, the rural aid, the other grants. And here's how it looks from one year, from FY25 to FY26. There's a town appropriation percentage that goes up slightly, and that the majority of that has to do with the school choice, which we can get to when we get to the grants page.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. All right. So I guess maybe just before we move on, I know that Susie alerted us to this, but there's a slight, small reduction in the amount of rural aid that's been flagged for this proposed budget. Can anybody speak to that? Is that's is that an assumption that we're making, or is that a confirmed piece of information in terms of what we're going to be receiving?
That is a confirmed amount. So this year, we don't get rural aid numbers until October and November of the current fiscal year that we've already budgeted for.
Hmm.
So the rural aid went down a little bit this year. They had a couple extra districts that they first gave us the amounts, and then they said, no, there's a couple extra districts involved. And since it's one pot of money that gets divided, that is a decrease in what we are anticipating, what we were receiving in rural aid this year, and what we'll probably receive next year.
Yeah. Okay. Susie?
And the school committee accepted the projection of 80,000 for rural aid. They had been at 65. And so we talked about what would happen if the state didn't come through. The state basically came through. In fact, they came through at 82 and then said, oh, we forgot Martha's Vineyard and, Williamsburg. So then the number went down to 76. So it's safe to say, as much as we know anything is safe, that 76,000 something is the FY26 projection.
Okay. All right. We're plugging in 75 for this budget, but yeah, it's going to be in that neighborhood. Okay, got it. All right, I'm gonna go to the next page here. Okay. All right, Caitlin, how do you want to do this? Do you want me to sort of pause at each page for you to provide any important context?
Sure. So I can go over, sorry, I got kicked off a second ago, but I'm back and I hope it doesn't happen again.
Okay.
So for the administration subcategory, most of those lines are Union 28 lines, which there was an increase for Shutesbury based on their increasing enrollment, which is a great thing. There's more students, there's more kids in the town, but it does impact your allotment of the Union 28 budget a little bit. So you did go up more than any of the other Union 28 schools, which is why there's an slight increase for all of the Union 28 lines 6 through 28. And there was no change for any of the lines that have to do with specifically to the Shutesbury budget.
Got it. Okay.
For the instruction lines,
Mm-hmm.
there is an increase in line 31 for the just contractual copier maintenance. And most of the other increases for the instruction line category are all due to the teacher and other units contract. So we went through a full contract cycle last year, and then we settled this past fall. And so we're now having those lines meet what the current agreement is with the association.
Got it. Can you do me a favor and just on lines 35 through 37, which I assume are kind of the bulk of your instructional personnel. Can you talk a little bit about kind of sort of why we have kind of a large increase on teacher salaries? I'm sure some component of that are the negotiated increases in the contract, and but then we see like fairly large reduction on 36. Are you sort of moving? Is there some moving of people around from one line to the other? Or?
Yeah, so those are lines that we may have had one year a teacher covered by school choice, another year with Title I, and so it's a little bit hard to read right now as we transition to what we're doing with having all of the grants and other funding pulled out, because it looks like there's a large increase in one line and then a decrease, but it's just how we're allocating some of those salaries, whether to grants or to the revolving funds.
Got it.
But the staffing has stayed the same. There are not any increases in any of the staff.
All right, so like the FTE numbers are essentially staying the same from,
Essentially staying the same.
all right. I see a couple hands up, so I'm gonna ask, Suzie, is your hand up from your
Oh,
earlier?
I'm sorry, yes.
No
I'll
problem.
lower it.
Let me go to Bob and then Jim.
Hey, Caitlin, Bob Groves. I'm confused by the way this is constructed. With the marginal quotes that sort of obscure or make it impossible to understand what's going on in the line. I wonder why we can't just have the actual line with the actual number of dollars in it and have the funding in a different place. With these marginalia, as you just said, we can't really tell whether the line, the spending is going up or down or staying the same. So it's hard for us to see what the budget represents truly. So why can't we have it done more clearly?
I think moving forward, it will be more clear, and that's why we're having the budget change so that we're able to pull those things out of it, so that moving forward, you'll be able to tell year to year to year how it changes line to line. When we were in the previous years, we'd say, we're gonna use 25,000 from Title I. Well, you didn't know where that was coming from, which line it was coming from. And now we're giving specifically which line it's going to come from, so that, but looking back as compared to last year, it may look like there was an amount budgeted, and then when we remove some of the funding, I hate to say it, it's not what you want to hear. There are no changes to what the current staffing are, except for the change in the formatting of the budget and some of the reductions in school choice that we've chose to do. So for teacher salaries, there was a decrease in school choice. What was last year we budgeted more in school choice for some of the salaries. This year we're budgeting less. So for next year, what you'll see is the consistency of what we're doing a little bit better.
Well, I guess for me, Caitlin, it would be better if you just put the monies from grants and so forth as supporting the budget and just show us what the actual budget is. I don't know. That's what all the other budgets we look at, how they appear. And it's easy to understand what you're recommending or whereas, say, for example, one of the things I'm concerned about is if I'm trying to evaluate the budget for the taxpayer is, whether we're following the policy of the finance committee, which is for level services. I can't really see whether we're having level services in this budget. I can't tell. That makes it hard for me to do due diligence on it. So I hope that this year we can have a clearer representation of what you propose, so that we can see what it is. Is that going to happen, or we talking about next year?
Talking about next year. I think because some of the changes to where we're funding with school choice and where you would have last year and the years before not seen where it's coming from, this is actually moving forward towards transparency of this is exactly the way that we're going to be seeing those lines.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you now show school choice as supporting the budget. That was a struggle that we had. I've been around this committee for 9 years, so that was an issue that we did a lot of discussing about, and I see that as a positive thing that you show the school choice as a revenue source supporting the budget, and you show how much you're using in a given year. That helps me, but I won't repeat myself, but I would prefer to see a more clear representation of what your budget represents than what I see in front of me.
Okay, well, I can go line by line to so for line 35, the teacher salaries, we're using the early childhood revolving, and you'll see that further down in the grants page. But there's also, that's where the decrease in school choice is going to appear most. Is that what we were funding more with school choice? We're hoping to budget for less use of school choice because our school choice numbers our amounts are not coming in to make it a sustainable account. For line 36, teacher specialist regular education salaries, that is going down. We're also using school choice for that and Title I funding. And for teacher specialists, special education salaries, that's also a decrease there based on change in personnel and staffing.
And one other thing, I'll be quiet for at least for a while. How many of these positions are positions that were introduced during the COVID? And is it, for example, the inclusion specialist, are these things that were part of our policy, part of your staffing requirements, or were they things that were introduced during the COVID crisis and then have just stayed in the budget as permanent?
I didn't work here when around the time of COVID. I don't know when it was introduced, but we've had that position, which we've slowly kind of scaled back on. I don't know when it began though in the budget.
Thank you.
So that position being line 38, the inclusion specialist? Is that?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
this,
okay, got it.
as long as I've been there, I believe there has not been an inclusion specialist, but we've used that line for contracted services around inclusion for students.
Got it. And so the reason why that's being reduced by $30,000 is because it's been determined that there's less of a need. That's not a line where you're utilizing other grant funding or school choice funding to support that position. Is that correct?
No,
Right. Okay.
that is just
Yeah.
identify that there is a reduced need.
Okay.
And we looked at every line and where we could save. And that was one of the lines that we decided we could reduce in order to get the budget as clean and lean as we could.
Okay. Got it. Jim, I see your hand up. Yeah.
Yes, Caitlin, I was wondering, in the past, we have not spent, as far as school choice money is concerned, we've only spent a portion of it or a percentage of it, maybe 60%. Is that true for this year as well, or are we spending it all?
We're overspending school choice
Overspending, okay.
by a fair amount, and we can get away with it for a couple years, and then we're going to drive down the account to where it's not going to be able to be budgeted for or to be a resource when we need it.
I see. Thank you.
Could you give us a rough idea? I don't think it's represented anywhere in the budget here, but what the balance in that fund is, and maybe kind of what what revenue came in on that line, and maybe last year, just to give us a little
Sure.
bit of context on that. Yeah.
So I believe, and have to check with the town, but I believe we have about 200,000 in the school choice account. We for the current year, FY25, we have budgeted and we're using $161,569, and we're only receiving about $99,000.
Got it.
For next year, that's going up to I think about $105,000. There's a slight increase, but we're still going to be overspending it by using $138,261. So we're not doing it. We can't do it because then that would mean too much in the town appropriations. We can't do it all at once, but we need to really think about long-term, not even long-term, the next 5 years, how we're going to match what we're spending from school choice to what we're receiving in school choice.
Yeah. And there's no information you can share at this point about kind of what direction you expect that school choice receiving amount? I mean, like, is our sort of best guess that that's going to be fairly stable at the around the amount that you described there, like $90,000-$100,000?
I don't.
Mhm.
I don't have a best guess. It depends on, a lot of it has to do with the dynamics of the classrooms and the class sizes. We don't, with Shutesbury, it's one class per grade. So there's a limited number of spots, and some of those, if the principal and superintendent decide that there's 4 spots for school choice students, or 2 spots or 10 spots, or and what kind of applications we get in that, then it kind of really has to do with the dynamic of the classroom and what the school can have. So could we have a year where we have 300,000 in school choice? Probably not, because the school can't absorb that many students. So I wouldn't expect a huge increase, and I hope to not expect a huge decrease in school choice students.
All right, great. Maybe I'll move on to the next page in this budget. Okay, anything on this page you wanted to highlight?
So this is the kind of second portion of the instruction categories. Most of these, well, some of these still have to do with the contract that was negotiated. And then the last portion are Union 28 lines. Do you want me to go over any ones in particular?
Bob?
Caitlin, I wanted to ask you about line 71. I wanted to ask you whether that was a recurring expense, whether that was a short-term expense, whether that was going to be, and also whether it would be reimbursed to us from some source, from the feds or somebody else that pays for that kind of thing.
Yeah, so line 71, the special education transportation, we will have that expense for the next few years. I don't know exactly which, and I try not to know specifics about the students involved in tuition and transportation, but I believe that is not an expense that's going to go away in the next year or two. What we've done is try to budget our circuit breaker to cover some of that expense.
And is
that
that,
we expect to receive.
reimbursed by the state or after the end of the fiscal
Yeah.
year?
So that's and we'll kind of get to the grants and other revolving accounts, but for circuit breaker out of district transportation, we're budgeting for $20,549 to come from circuit breaker, which is the state giving us some funding towards for needs for students that have larger costs associated with tuition and transportation.
So we're showing that in the budget as supporting the budget.
The grant sheet.
Yeah, so the amount you'll see for special education transportation, line 71, is what is remaining after we've used $20,549 in anticipated circuit breaker money funding.
Okay, thank you.
I had a quick question just on lines 43 and 44. So I think you essentially already said this earlier, but just want to confirm that in terms of like FTE counts on paraeducators, we're not expecting a change in FY26. Is that right?
Yeah, no changes to the staffing we have in the building.
Okay, got it. All right. Any other questions on any individual lines here? Move on. Okay. All right, Susie?
Caitlin, I know that you said you got a lock on the fuel cost contract or whatever it's called.
Yes.
And how's that looking at this number here, which I've forgotten what line it was. I think it was on the last page, previous page.
Line 75 on page 5.
75.
Okay. So no change anticipated there.
Change, we went over budget last year. We have a slight decrease of about, I think, 11 cents per gallon. We locked in back in January. So we'd like to keep it the same, knowing we have a little bit of a decrease in what the per gallon cost is, but we also have run over that line in the past.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, any questions on page 6 here? All right. Okay. Oh, Jim?
Yeah, I was going to say, as far as fuel cost is concerned, this winter is promising to be the 5th coldest on record. So we should be using, or the school should be using, probably a lot more fuel this year, significantly more than, for example, last year, which was one of the warmer winters on record. But I think we're in for a fairly tough roll, all of us here in Shutesbury, coming up this winter.
I agree. I definitely feel it every time it's cold. It's really cold. I walk my dogs and it's negative 12 degrees out. I think about the heating costs of some of the buildings because they're large buildings and it is a extraordinary cost.
Yeah.
Maybe the new roof.
All right. All right, so this is your kind of grants and school choice section. So maybe you can kind of walk us through the proposal here, kind of how you're going to utilize these funds.
Sure. So this is how we've pulled out all of the funding that was kind of smashed together in our overall use in the presentation. And so now we've separated it so you can see exactly what we're using all of this funding for. So it's been removed from the presentation and from the summary. For title grants, we are budgeting for $16,000 for towards the reading specialist supplies and some other expenses. Title IV, contracted services and supplies, and contracted services in Title II also. For the IDEA grants, that's the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act grant. What we were using it for student support, we would now be using it for out-of-district tuition. And you won't see that amount in the budget pages previous because we're using a grant. This is going to be grant funded. It should live separate and outside of the operating budget. For early childhood, we also receive a small grant through IDEA and we'll continue to use that. We're going to use that towards partial paraprofessional for special education salary. The REAP grant, which is the Rural Education Federal Grant, we'll be using it towards our MLL or multi-language learner teacher for $16,397. And again, a lot of the grants we get, we don't know the amounts until the fall, and we'd like to think that they will increase. They might increase a little bit, and sometimes they decrease. So we're looking at the numbers we're receiving this year to budget for next year. For circuit breaker, we'd like to use that amount, and the decrease is what we anticipated for this FY25 budget, but what we actually received in FY25 was not $30,074, it was $20,549. So we can only budget for what we actually received, and that will go towards out-of-district transportation. For rural aid, we are going to budget for the paraeducator salary, $40,000. Instrumental teacher stipends, $12,000. For curriculum support, we were doing 10,000, but we're not going to use it towards that this year. School power and building maintenance is where we would like to use it. We're decreasing the amount for rural aid from 80,000 to 75,000 based on the amount that we received this year. And the early childhood revolving fund, we would like to increase from the FY25 budget of using 30,000 of the revolving fund to 35,000. Again, this is just an effort to offset the budget and the town appropriations. If we can use a little bit more of our revolving accounts and our revenues, then we can decrease as much as we are able to what we're asking of the town. School choice, that's where we have the biggest decrease, and I think we talked about that a little bit. Those are the positions that we were using school choice for the MLL teacher, essential skills teacher, speech and language pathologist, math coach, and instructional assistant. We've modified those amounts a little bit. We're moving the MLL teacher to being funded through, I think, rural aid instead. And no, through our REAP grant instead. So that will come off of school choice, because school choice should really be used for things that are accessible to all students, because those students are coming from other districts, the money should go towards things that are accessible to them. And we'd like to reduce the amount that we are depending on school choice from 161,569 to 138,261 to try to close the gap between what our revenue is from the state for school choice to what we're expending, what we're counting on expending.
So what is the MLL acronym, an acronym for again?
Multi-language learner
Got it.
teacher.
So that teacher for FY25 was supported through school choice and the REAP grant. But for FY26, we're only utilizing that same amount of the REAP grant. So I'm assuming the balance of that position is funded through the operating budget. Is that right?
I think so. I think we cover a portion of that teacher's salary.
So that, right, because so that position still exists at the same at the same level. It's just being supported partly through the operating budget this time. Okay, got it.
And we're lucky to have a teacher that it's hard to fill such a small role, because we share that teacher through 3 different districts. If we were to try to hire someone at just a 0.33 or a 0.3, it would be really difficult to fill it in our rural areas. So that's why we felt that using the REAP grant that is, partially given to us so that we can try to tackle the challenges of having a rural district, that was a good use of it.
Got it. Okay. Any questions from the committee on these various kind of grant funds and school choice funds and what they're being applied to? Susie?
And I want to say that in some ways, having these broken out and assigned different budget lines, if let's see, the American Relief budget that the Congress passed in December did not put the REAP grant back in it. We have our REAP money for FY25, but we don't know, with the chaos that's going on, how that looks for FY26. And if you've been listening to the news, there are tons of attacks going on the budgeting. So the title grants, which are federal, and the IDEA, which is federal, we have to write to our legislators and our federal legislators to say, these need to be sustained. Whether the state administers these with federal money or the feds administer them, these are exactly what's on the line right now. You can see them.
Kathy?
Just what does the REAP acronym stand for, Caitlin?
Gosh, I know rural education.
So-
I can look it up. Hold on. Sorry.
These are all new to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of acronyms in education. It's our SRSS grant that we have a REAP, and I just SRS as small rural schools. REAP is rural education, but I will look up exactly what it is. It's a good question.
Thank you. Just curious.
Caitlin, you said an interesting thing that I hadn't considered before when talking about the decision on not utilizing the school choice funds this year for the MLL teacher. And I think you said that, and it sounded like this is kind of a policy sort of issue that the district ought to utilize school choice funds on items that service the entire school population, as opposed to like a specific sort of special population within the school. And so I guess I just want to confirm, is that a sort of policy decision that the school committee or district is making, and that we should keep in mind in the future that anything that we see being funded through school choice is going to be for an expense line that in theory services the entire school population?
Yes, you don't want to target something, like you wouldn't want to put your school choice towards funding after school or funding kind of select groups or things that aren't accessible to the wider group of students that you serve.
Okay, got it.
And I do have, it is the Rural Education Achievement Program is REAP.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions on this page? Okay, I mean, that is the budget. Maybe I'll pop it back up to the first kind of overview page and see if there are any kind of general questions that committee members wanted to ask at this point. Bob.
Yeah, hi, Caitlin. I just want to make a recommendation for myself. I've seen in other budgets an accounting of the school choice account, the revolving account over time. And it's very useful to see what the state of that is, because that's very essential to a large degree to funding this budget. So, you know, if we knew that the balance was 100,000 and that this year the school was going to be allocating 50,000 and then we would know what the balance was and how to anticipate what be happening in the coming years. That's one thing that's good. The other thing to be good for us to see is enrollment over time when the budget's presented, because that's another critical piece of data that really helps us understand what the school is doing, where they're headed, and you know, if enrollment's going up or if it's going down or if it's staying level. Those are all important considerations when we're studying your finances. So those are just two recommendations.
I did send out the enrollment numbers.
Okay, Jim?
Yeah, Susie mentioned this unfortunate topic, but could you give us a rough idea of how much of the grant monies would disappear if Washington really heads in the wrong direction in the upcoming year? It seems to be a lot of trouble ahead for school support from Washington. I was just wondering if you had thought about that or had any idea of what we might be facing.
Sure. So we don't know. I can't offer, I know which areas have come up in the news. I haven't seen anything concrete around any of it. I mean, everything is changing, especially recently, day by day.
Mhm.
the areas that I grow most concerned about are especially our REAP funding, which isn't a lot, but it does help with our budget. But then we do hear things about title, IDEA, and other federal funding sources, and we don't know. Shannon might have a better idea or better, more political response to that than I do tonight.
I don't think anyone wants my political response, but I'm the superintendent of schools for those of you who I have not had an opportunity to meet. The guy, it's incredibly fluid. We are getting updates every day. The only thing that we have been told that federally is probably not on the table to be impacted is anything to do with school lunch programs. But we have heard everything from, as she said, the title grants to IDEA. We really don't know. And I wish I had a better answer for that, but I would say other than school lunch, probably everything's on the table to be considered from their vantage point.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer for you.
Mhm.
I do know, and I shared with my leadership team today, there was right now it's been rescinded, but we know that that's temporary. A bunch of states under the auspice of New York, but Massachusetts is included in them, have filed to challenge that anything that Congress has already approved cannot be touched, which might get us through another fiscal year. And there seems to be some precedent for that may remain intact, but there's really all the groups from the school committee, Mass School Committee Association to the Mass Superintendents really has no idea. It's been so unpredictable. They can't even gauge what could be next.
Shannon, could you verify though that like at least for FY25, I'm assuming all these top three categories, right, are all title grants, IDEA, and REAP are all kind of federal, either sort of funds that are block granted to the states or directly administered by the federal government. Are all of those like forward funded, like where we've already received our FY25, like we've already drawn down our FY25 amounts?
Caitlin would actually be better able to answer that because that's our current year. So I'm actually going to defer to Caitlin for that.
Sure. So for these grants, often it's a reimbursement. So we spend the money in the grant in our grant lines, and then we ask for reimbursement, and they give us a reimbursement for what we've spent. I have not seen any indication that we are going to not be funded for FY25, especially with the support from the state and federally to continue with the funding for FY25. It's already been allocated to the schools. It's already been assigned. And I don't believe that we will find any challenges with getting reimbursed for the funds we've spent.
Okay. So I know that freeze was they reversed course on that, but if that had gone through, it does sound like some of these reimbursable items would have been threatened if that freeze had sort of-
I think if that freeze had come through, we would have been looking at new funding. This funding is already in, and Caitlin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but is already in DESI hands. So it's already in state hands.
I see.
We're just, because that's how we're getting reimbursed. But I don't think it would have impacted this.
I see.
But any funds that hadn't been dispersed, sure, could have probably been on the table.
Got it. Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Okay, the sort of final question I had, Caitlin, was just for sort of planning purposes for us. Is there any line in this budget that was sort of like a temporary placeholder where you're sort of waiting on some piece of information that we might actually get between now and like when we need to prepare our final budget in, let's say, in a month? Or can we go ahead and utilize this number right now as kind of the total appropriation for FY26?
I think we're at the place right now that we have all of the information that we've been waiting on, and this is about as refined as we're going to get.
Okay, got it. And the school committee has already like approved this budget, or is that happening?
They had a preliminary approval of the budget.
All right, great. All right. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions from the committee, so I just want to thank you for joining us and walking us through this. And then I think also, I just want to say, I know, kind of through Susie's role as a liaison, like we ask a lot of sort of questions and we ask for a lot of kind of refinement of this budget. And I just want to kind of publicly thank you for always being really responsive to our requests when we have questions, or we ask to like, can we see this other thing in the budget? And I know it's kind of a work in progress, and we've kind of made some important changes this year, but it sounds like we now have a kind of budget format that we're going to now get used to seeing in future years. That'll kind of help make it sort of easier for us to sort of wrap our heads around. But anyway, I just want to thank you for always being such an accommodating colleague and partner on this. I really do appreciate it.
I want to thank you all, because if every town operated this way and had a Susie to be the person between the school and the finance committee, then they would all operate way more effectively and efficiently. So I want to thank Susie and thank you all, because I appreciate your questions. I know you're doing your due diligence for the town and for the taxpayers, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, when we're at Union 28, they always ask what our model is, and we tell them, but nobody seems to adopt the Susie model of school committee meetings. So it's at their detriment.
Yes,
Agreed.
for sure. Yeah, and Susie just has like, it's not just that she does a great job as a liaison, but she's kind of been in this role for a while, and she knows like she knows the issues really well, and that helps our committee a lot. So thank you, Susie. Okay, well, thanks to everybody who joined us on the elementary school and side of things, and from Union 28. We really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Susie.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thanks, Susie.
Thanks. So,
AJ, for some reason, I can't raise my hand.
oh, okay. Sorry, George. So yeah, you should just shout out then.
Okay, yeah, I don't know.
I don't know how else we'll get. Did you have any questions that
No,
you need?
Mike, the questions I had were asked. Yeah.
All right, sounds good.
Just raise your actual hand, George. That'll
Yeah,
work.
okay.
That's understood. The only problem with that is that when I share a document, all of a
Yeah,
sudden
that's
Right.
That's true.
my Windows.
Oh, it's not a big deal. I just thought maybe it was a setting or something. No big deal.
Okay, got it. All right. Let's see. Why don't we kind of quickly just look at January 21st meeting minutes, and then we'll talk. We'll go on to the next item. Let's see. So George sent us minutes
This weekend, Saturday or Sunday.
from January 20th.
Great minutes.
Oh, good. George,
George, they're really excellent minutes. I really appreciate it.
you're welcome. Thank you. I appreciate that. I do work hard on it, but
Yeah.
this is a recording of what went on,
Yeah,
It's important.
yeah. We're in the same business, as you know. I do the MLP minutes, and our styles are fairly similar.
Oh, good. And I have had experience because I did it for the personnel board for a number of years.
But they look great. They're wonderful.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Does anybody have any questions for George or any suggestions or corrections?
I like them. I'll make a motion to approve them as written.
Second,
Great. Any other discussion?
Arvanitis, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Salvador, I.
And Stein, aye.
Great. Thanks, George.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we've got a choice now. I think we've got two sort of big topics to discuss. One is just take our sort of first kind of rough look at the FY26 budget, kind of using George has done a lot of work with Gabe to kind of plug in the various pieces of information that we've gotten from our meetings with different department heads, and also I think from a preliminary cherry sheet estimate. So we're gonna take a look at that tonight, and then we've also are gonna discuss the upcoming Four Towns meeting and talk a little bit about kind of latest updates that we've gotten from the regional district on the direction they may be heading in. So I guess my question is do we want to do the big picture budget review first? Because that might inform some of the thoughts we have about what we can afford to do, what our position would be going into Four Towns. Okay, I'm seeing some heads nodding. So, all
That
right,
makes sense.
George, can I? How would you want to do this? Should I share the document you?
No, I think it'd be better if I,
You did it? Okay.
yeah, if I just showed it on my screen and I could just walk through it.
Okay. So
Um,
I'm going to make you co-host temporarily.
Okay. Yeah, I had some trouble with my PC and I had to reboot. It wasn't letting me log in here, so things are a little discombobulated, but I've got it up now.
So I just made you co-host. So I'm assuming you can share your screen if whenever you want to pop that.
Yes. Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so Gabe worked on this on the weekend, and she was not going to be able to work today or yesterday. So I haven't really been talking to her much. We have communicated via email. So I took the budget she gave me, and there was still a number of things to be done, and she hasn't had direction from us in a number of areas. So I went ahead and made some assumptions. I documented everything so that she and I will be in complete communication about what's going on. And I documented everything for you folks as well. And hopefully we can make some decisions or not today. But the assumptions that are underlying this right now is the excess levy capacity is unchanged. We don't really do anything with that until we decide, to what extent we are. It's usually one of the last things we do. Gabe came up with $35,000 in new growth, and I've got that as an open item over here. These are the open items. I want to talk to her more about that to see how she actually determined that. State aid from the cherry sheet, which is the governor's, came out last week. And so I sent it along to her. She probably already had it, but she put it in, and it's an additional $10,000. And then local sources is still in process. I think Gail is helping Gabe with it, so we'll have to see. But there was one item was increased by 2,700. I think it was pilot money. We'll see when we go down. And then none of the cash was applied. There's been no cash applied to it like we did last year. So these are the revenue assumptions that we're going by. The 2.5 is in there, which I didn't write here, but it's the 2.5 is already been added. On the expenses, basically all the department budget amounts are what the departments presented to us, right? We didn't make any decisions to cut any. Looking at inflation and the COLA calculation, I did a rough estimate of it. We'll have the numbers in another couple days when the Fed issues the January CPI, but I did through December and I came up with 2.92, and so I rounded to 295 because no doubt it'll go up a little in the month of January. So salary increases are all in here at 2.95, with the exceptions of contracts and the positions that are currently being negotiated and the ones that ask for changes, like the assistant administrator, the police chief, the police staffing, those are not subject to this percentage because those are being recalculated based on restructuring, if you will.
But on George, on that point, so for those staff positions that are have negotiated contracts, did you have access to the right numbers to put in for FY26?
Well, no, that's going to be up to Gabe, and I gave her a list of those.
Okay, got it. So that's something to that's
She may have done some of them already. There's not that many because the town administrator is under negotiation. The police chief is under negotiation. The union for the school is already in the school budget. The police union is irrelevant because if we go along with what's been requested, that's all been recalculated for us by the chief.
Right.
I don't know who that leaves.
Highway.
Highway and fire.
Well, highway was negotiated this year, so they gotta, I'm not sure where that number appears, but we
Yeah,
did the
so those are
highway.
probably the two. Let me write those down. I'll definitely follow up on those. Highway superintendent and fire. She may have already done those. Maybe we'll see as we go through. I don't remember. Okay, so that's a good question. Thank you. We have an amount that we transfer to the capital stabilization. I put in the full amount. Usually it's that amount gets decreased by the amount of the debt service, but we don't have any debt service numbers right now. So debt service is not funded at all. And the full amount that we would pay for the transfer plus debt service is in here. And once we figure out the debt service, this line will be decreased. But I wanted to make sure we had the full amount in the budget for the
and the full
calculation.
amount is at 170.
695.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and we know there'll be interest for sure because and I hope this decision isn't made, but we can talk about it another time. If bond counsel tells Ryan we should wait another year for those 3 items and just pay the interest, then we know we'll at least have that in the debt service. And this number, the 112 will go down by that. 113 really will go down by that. But there's a whole nother conversation because we can't keep delaying paying these things off. Then we're going to have other capital purchases and we're going to have all these assets, but conversation for another day. I had to make a decision. So I took the first option for the regional school and we can talk about that, but it's, AJ mentioned in an email, it's a fairly conservative number. I think it is. At 4%, we're at $66,000 increase. So this is a little higher than that, but this will kind of help us for our next conversation. So, and
We'll come back
this is
to
subject to change, once if anything we decide to change right now, here today, I can easily make the change and we can see what the impact is. I'm sorry, okay.
Nope, you can keep going.
There's a new line, was not funded, but it was added, and it's PFAS mitigation. So that's something we might want to talk about. And then the other question I had was the town building repairs maintenance fund. I left it at $10,000. But we have to talk about the policy we did for that. So these are the underlying assumptions on the numbers that you're going to see. As far as what's still open, I want to ask Gabe about new growth. There was an amount for $15,000 for this particular line, veterans benefits, on the cherry sheet that she did not put in revenue. And so I want to ask her why she didn't. She may know something we don't, so I didn't want to touch it. So I just left it at 0. Potential pickup there. The preliminary cherry sheet, $765,099. That's the governor's. There'll be more coming along. 1% increase. Like I told you, local sources are still in process. And then expenses that we still need to talk about. For some reason, we were told that the assistant town administrator would be $41,006. Gabe put in 44, so I need to ask her about that. She left the independent audit blank because she didn't know. I level funded it just for the purposes of our conversation. We don't know what the chief's salary is, but I increased her 2 lines by 10%. Just, I can tell you by looking at, I've seen the surveys from FERCog, they came out 2 weeks ago, and our police chief she's paid a lot less than many others in the area. And so I just put in a conservative number again, so that we can see what our deficit might be. Also for the fire department, and the fire department rep might be able to speak to this. Gabe had put these 2 numbers in for these 2 lines. 0 was requested at our meeting. I went back and looked at my minutes, and I went and looked at the document we have from the fire chief. Gabe's notes said that these were requested from the fire chief to her. So we need to figure that out. And then she had not, she doesn't have numbers yet for these next 2 lines. So I just put in 10% increases. And these are the numbers that I put in. Again, this is placeholder. So these are the numbers I actually use in the budget. So Gabe was going to have to research and find out about these. And that's what she mentioned to me in an email. But I just put in 10% increase, given all that we're seeing going on. You can see a 10% increase wouldn't be a substantial amount of money. But being conservative, elementary transportation, she hadn't entered it for some reason. So I added last year's number with 5%. She didn't put in the high school debt. I assume she hasn't got that yet from the region. I put it in at 36,000. It was a little more than what it was in FY25. Remember, this is also a revenue source because it's debt exclusion override. So it's in the revenue as well as the expense. So whatever number I use, it's not going to have an impact on the deficit. And then fire mitigation, we had them in there last year for $5,000, these 2 lines. And she wasn't sure what to do with them. She left them blank. I threw the $5,000 back in, and we need to talk about that. And of course, we need to talk about this. For some reason, she didn't have inspector of animals in there, so I threw it in. I'll ask her about this. And then for the retirement, she actually showed me the letter she received from the agency that bills us for retirement, and it shows that next year's bill is $181,000, but we budgeted $270, and we've spent all but $15,000 of it this year. And she looked at last year's letter, and last year's letter was also a number much smaller than what we budgeted. So there's something going on, and she doesn't know what it is. She had put 181,000, this 189,27 in the budget. I put in 270. I overwrote it because that's more likely what it's going to be. But she's still going to research it. And then for some reason, Ryan, I went back at our notes, and Ryan told us health insurance is $598, but Gabe entered $624. He said 15%. She added 20%. So I need to follow up with Gabe and find out what's going on with that.
Right.
I maybe should have left the 624 in to be safe, but I figured I was bumping this up. I don't know. And if you want me to, I can certainly change it back. But that's what I've done for now. And then town building maintenance I talked about already. And then this is the number for the capital transfer to capital stabilization. And that's subject to change, like we talked about earlier. So those are all the things that underlie the numbers that I'm going to go over with right now. And so
Yeah, let's pause for a second before we look at what this all translates to. Bob?
George, how you doing? I just wanted to mention to you a couple of things that were on my mind thinking forward. One of them was the legal line, which we had a difficulty, getting a handle on that last couple of years. So that's something to think about this year too.
Gabe has. We'll see it when we go through expenses.
Yeah, the second one was, the fire hose, new fire hoses and the gear. That was something that we folded into the equipment line in the budget a couple of years ago. So I think Lenny was counting that. So maybe we did used to have as a separate revolving account, but then we decided to eliminate that account and have it as part of the recurring budget. So something I think is the way it worked out. The other thing was
so 1 second, Bob. So 1 second. So should Gabe ask him, is the fire hose replacement cost included in his maintenance line?
No, in equipment line.
Equipment line. I'm sorry. Yes.
Sure. I know that's the way we budgeted it when we changed it. But the other thing I wanted to ask was, on the elementary transportation, isn't that in the school budget or no?
No, that's sped transportation. That was
Okay,
in the school
the
budget.
buses are not.
The
Yeah, you'll
contract
see
with
when
the
we go
region-
through the expense lines, you'll see that there's a separate line for the transportation, the rank and file,
And
regional and elementary school kids.
the final thing is the town building repairs, that's something we can talk about is, last year we funded it out of reserves, I think. And, there's a good argument to be made, I'll probably be making it, that we should have that capital as a capital expense, not a recurring expense. But anyway, we'll see what the numbers add up to, but that's what I mentioned that to you.
Yeah, as far as that goes, yeah, we did. We funded 40,000. We'll see it. And we put 10 in the operating budget from tax levy and 30 from free cash with the plan to slowly ramp it up. But I think Gabe has a note on that. And I think that some people don't think that's necessary, but I don't know. What, like you said, that's got to be talked about at capital planning if we ever do meet.
Yeah,
So,
right.
So I'm just going to slide this over a little just so we can see it better. So there's our property tax levy limit, and the 2.5% is that number right there. And then Gabe came up with 35,000 in new growth. So our new limit, it would be 6,704. As I said earlier, the high school budget, high school capital plan, I'm sorry, and the debt exclusion override item is 36,000 is what I used. We'll get another number, but again, it balances itself out because we'll see it also on the expense side, and they'll always be equal. And then excess levy capacity, right now, we're assuming no change. Of course, that changes automatically. And to the extent that we decide to use it to fund this budget, this number will decrease or increase, I should say, and be a smaller negative. And then the overlay, 40,000 is what we use every year for our estimate. Overlay, just for everybody's information, because maybe not everybody's familiar, you have to assume that there's a certain amount of your tax levy that won't be collectible. And so it's been safe to use 40,000. So what we do is, even though the tax levy is, how does this work? Is 5,877. Yeah. We just balance our budget on a smaller amount because we know that there's a certain portion of this tax levy that won't be collected. So we just take 40,000 out, which is usually has historically been more than enough. By the way, this also covers some of the not only abatements that people will file for, because they might convince the assessors that their house is overvalued. It also is some of the exemptions like veterans benefits, veterans exceptions that the Commonwealth allows. It's not the means testing though. So anyways, a little too much talking there. And then the cherry sheet. This is to the right here. I cut and paste the cherry sheet information from the web, but just so I could get these numbers in here and make sure that Gabe got them in there right. And she entered them all. She got them. I just have one line that I disagree with her on, and I got to ask her about.
The veterans.
Yeah, it's $320. It's not huge. And then why isn't she including? And the reason I didn't put it back in is because I noticed that it's not in the recap and it's not here. So she knows something I don't know, that we don't know. So we'll find out. So anyways, the bottom line on the cherry sheet is right here. And you can see, state aid goes up by $10,000 under the governor's budget. Now, usually the House Ways and Means Committee comes up with better numbers for us. But even if, how much more could they come up with? And then local receipts are still a work in process. The only one they changed was the payment in lieu of taxes. I'm sorry about that. Not sure why, but it might have to do with their agreements with either Temenos or the town of Amherst or Sirius Community. It's probably not related to what they're expecting from the state, because the state probably hasn't really published that information yet. And so when you take the amount that we need to raise from the tax levy, this number here, and then you add in the cherry sheet amount, what we think the local aid will be, this is what we think our revenue is going to be. 1.24% increase, $90,000 increase. And the reason it really, in the upper section, is a 200,000 increase. But right now, we haven't applied any free cash to this budget. So this 117 basically goes away. And everything that we funded with that last year is now got to be funded by the tax levy, to the extent that they're in the budget still.
George, I have a question. Where is the Airbnb revenue? Isn't
That's
it,
in local receipts.
and did you see it?
Just carrying it over, right? Other excise room.
Right there, line
Oh,
42.
room, okay.
Yeah.
So I thought that number went up. So they're carrying over last year. Was last year's up from the previous year?
Yes. Yeah.
22, yeah, from 4 to 22. And that's
Yeah, if you want, Susie, I can put it on open items and ask Gabe.
no, I
think you
know
should
that we
actually.
were surprised the first year that it was doing better, but I couldn't, I see it's called, oh.
Yeah, I
other
remember.
excise.
Yeah, we were all excited. It was a big bump. AJ, what?
I think you should put it on your open items just to see if there's any development kind of up or down on what that looks like for this year.
Okay. All right, I'll get back to that, but I got a note here to at least remind me. Okay, so again, so that's our revenue. And again, the lack of cash means that we've got really not a lot of new revenue. It's really okay. Expenses. Just move it over a little. So Gabe has pretty extensive notes in here. Gabe and I have extensive notes in here. I put in the salary increases, 2.95%, like I talked about earlier. For some reason, this particular line, the administrative secretary, which is going to be changed to administrative assistant, we were told 41.6. Gabe's got 44,265. So we'll have to ask her about that. I think I don't know where this 85,000 for the town administrator came from, but I did see that somewhere.
Oh,
And AJ, this might be a good time for people to just let people just jump in as they have questions.
Yeah, sure. April.
Well, yeah, I was just wondering if Gabe's prediction of new growth is low. Given, when is the substation, when is that several $1 million worth of upgrade due to happen? I thought it was for this year, which would be significant new
Yeah,
growth.
I agree, April. That's why I put it on here. It's in here as an open item. This is
Okay.
something I'm going to address with her and ask her to look into. Did your brother ever figure it out?
No, I will ask him. I thought he said this year it was going to happen.
Yeah, I know there's something going on this year. We talked about it in the assessors
Yeah.
meeting.
It's several $1 million.
Yeah, so
Of
I've got it on the
upgrades.
radar.
Okay. And also the town administrator, that $85,000 is what was being bantered around. And I've been thinking that was pretty low, and it looks pretty low given the FY, this year's
survey,
budget.
the
Yeah.
FERCog wage survey. I noticed the same thing. There are
Yeah.
many of them that are making over $100,000 in Franklin County.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking Greenfield and Orange.
No, Sunderland.
FYI, the position's being advertised at that level.
Oh, okay.
That's
good.
okay, that's where I
Good.
got that number.
Is the personnel board making a recommendation at all on?
We will be.
Okay, but that
We will be.
hasn't happened.
Yeah, it'll probably be a negotiation with the person who they want to
Yeah.
offer the job to.
how
But it's in
close
the
is that
budget.
process to ending?
Well, we're in the middle, so we've still got people to interview before we make a recommendation.
But the
Still in.
candidates look pretty good, right?
We got candidates.
Okay,
We're not supposed to talk
that's a
about
start.
the budget.
Warm bodies are good.
Qualified sentence.
No, it's, yeah, we can't
I don't know
talk
if this
about
is the
that.
right time to talk about this, but how's the line looking for the TA this year, this fiscal year, with all the changes we went through?
I can bring it up if you want. I can just show you real quick. I mean, departments, we can look at the expense.
Budget.
I looked at the
Yeah,
expense
'cause-
today. It looked like it was like, oh, spent more than the other departments, so. I didn't know if the new money was added into that line or not.
Yeah, because
It looks like it was, yeah, 94,000 is definitely added in.
Yeah.
And we're at 56% in February. That's,
That's about right,
yeah, that is about right.
but we might have some overlap, so we might have a problem, but.
Yeah. Remember,
George.
we do have a hefty FinCom reserve number. And this is causing one of our problems year to year. That's weird. I have to look into why
Yeah, I
that's.
was gonna ask you about that one too. It's like only shown about 60. It didn't show any additions, I don't think.
I don't know what's going on with it. Oh, I think maybe they bring it to zero. I'll have to look. I'm gonna have to make a note to look at that. FY24 FinCom reserve. Make sure that that number's right. So yeah, remember we budgeted 55 and at special town meeting we added 25,000 and we funded it with cash.
Right.
One of the things that's contributing to our problems here. So I don't know who's going to be able to decide on the independent audit number. The actual spent in fiscal 24 was 14 grand. And I think everybody's aware, we build this line up over year over year over year. So we don't spend on this annually. If it was 14,000 in 24, then it seems to me 9,000 a year is too much.
is it every
So-
other year or every 3 year? I can't remember what it is.
I think it's every other year.
It's,
could be wrong.
It is every other year. And remember that the MLP pays for a rather good chunk of that.
Yeah, so this one might be too high.
Yeah, I think it is.
I was wondering is that something to talk with Ryan about?
Or, yeah, I mean, I don't know who
Nope.
engages the auditors. Usually it's probably the town administrator.
Yeah,
Or the accountant.
Yeah, it would be Gail, I think.
Gail might be the.
Yeah, Gail might be the right one. I'll talk to Gabe. I think Gabe will know what to do. And if not, I can contact Gail or, I don't know, we can talk about that.
George, is FY26 the year when we collect big bucks for property taxes on all those new three-phase poles that National Grid has been putting in?
I think
Wow, we did
that
that.
happened last year.
Yeah, that
Last
happened.
year? That's already
Yeah,
happened.
if
Okay.
you look at new growth, where is it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
what
look
was
at
that?
last year's new growth,
That was 200,000?
121.
Under
It's this number right
21,000.
here.
And that goes down rather rapidly, right?
Yep.
the
I don't know about
depreciation-
rapidly.
The depreciation is
10 or 20 years, I'm not sure. Yeah, it will go down.
But it won't be new growth.
Nope.
No.
No, now it's in the tax base.
Yeah.
It moves to the tax base the next year, but under personal property, not real property.
Right.
Okay, so I gotta keep this thing moving. So the assessors, this is just based on the budget the assessors gave us. Oh yeah, right, and we asked them if they could lower it, they said, yeah, sure, fine. Yeah, no certification, that's right, that was, you remember that conversation with David. Yeah, so I'll keep moving here then, and now we're adding $1,000 for the treasurer for his certification. Now that he is certified, we have to pay that every year. Tax title, we talked about making changes to that for the, and so those are in here. The tax collector information and what she requested is now in here. This is, Bob referred to the legal line, and this was, her comment. She thinks 20,000 is too low.
If recent history is any guide, it is.
It's a different fight now, though.
Yeah.
It's always a fight somewhere. So, you know, something for us to think about. Town clerk, I guess she collected information from the town clerk.
Yeah, I can verify that because I got a email that I saw today that from Grace, there were just some small changes in the proposed expense budgets for the town clerk and for the board of registrars, and those numbers look to have been plugged into this.
Okay,
Like-
good. Yeah, perfect.
And the.
Yeah, in the
legal-
registrar number, I typed this in because when I looked at it, my assumption, correct me if I'm wrong, AJ, is because of the election year.
Yes, that's right.
And did she,
That
Did she-
8,120 is what Grace had put in her proposed budget for, so that's the right number.
okay,
Back-
okay,
Back to legal, I just want to say that we've only spent 35% of it so far. This year.
Since you have that handy, what's the actual dollar amount that we spent so far?
I've got it.
I have that handy.
Okay,
What
I
I
forgot.
have is spent is 14,568.
Right,
And
'cause
it started at,
We budgeted,
allocated was 41,000, 41,025. So only 35 has been spent.
all right, well, we're gonna be looking for expenses, I can tell you that, so. something to consider.
George,
Yes,
I should have mentioned this a little while ago. On the independent audit, because of the library construction, it's every year while that construction's going on. Otherwise, it'd be every 2 years. So that's probably what those, we were wondering about the 9,000 or something like that. But I think, we have to come up with an independent audit every year for at least.
because of the size of the loan.
Yeah, because we're getting state money and it's a requirement. That's why that line will shoot up a little bit.
Thank you. All right, that's good to know. I'll put that in the minutes too. All right,
that's
well,
the case, I wonder if the 9,000 is enough, because if
yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's a,
bill was 14,000 last time we did it.
all
But
right.
we can check
That does
it.
put that in, that, well.
Let's leave it for now, but yeah.
Well, here, I just want to, before I move on, I just want to add that to this.
Yeah.
I'll be real quick. Confirm that this will be annual. And for how much? All right, hopefully Gabe can do some legwork on that too. And I'll work with Gabe to the extent that she wants help, but Gabe did tell me that she will be sticking around for a while, so she's going to be able to continue to work on the budget. We don't have a hard stop for her. I think that'll change when April and May comes around, but she said she was pretty good through the winter.
Well, that's good news.
We'll be finished with the budget by then, so.
Yeah, it sounds like she'll be here through the completing of the budget, which is great.
Oh, yeah.
It would even be better if she could make it to town meeting, but let's not get carried away. So she put in these numbers too for the dam. She got that information, the land use clerk. Yep, she got,
Could I check with the dam? There's a company that's dam managed consult. That is a contract, right?
It was
how much have they spent?
35,000, wasn't it, Susie? As I recall?
3,500.
3,500, okay.
Well, I
Remember
think
that
it's
35.
ongoing, so I just know if.
Oh, I see,
that-
over the
it's
long term.
working out.
Yeah, we budgeted for last year at 3,500.
Mhm. Oh, I can check what we're spending on that.
You got the spend up, right, Susie?
I got the spend doc, yeah. Damn. That be,
You're taking too long.
well, interesting.
Yeah, so they spent half of it. Well, at the consultant, they spent a little over half.
Okay.
55%.
Oh, okay, you might have a more current one. They must have paid something, because the one,
This is the one that stated the 6th of February.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, and it's posted out there, Susie.
okay, yep,
Oh, so you weren't looking at this one?
I know,
All right, so legal is at 62% spent.
2%, 40.
yeah,
45.
okay. I should put that on my screen.
15,000, okay.
I just want to fix my note here.
Here. Here. Yes.
Okay. Are we all set with the dam? Dam?
Yep.
I guess I don't know what's going on with Concom. I think these numbers came from Gabe.
No, they sent it to us and I sent it to her.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Planning board as well, I assume. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. You know what? I did see that email.
Yeah.
All right, so here's the number she's putting in for all these different things. Now she's got comments here on the right for these town expenses.
All right.
She doesn't have a note on supplies, but it seems like everybody we've met with has told us how paper has gone up and ink has gone up. And
Hmm.
So do you know if the town is getting a bid for oil and can lock in a price? Is she handling that?
no, but let me put it on the list.
Yeah.
Negotiating or locking in a price.
Mhm.
We'll find out. All right.
The other
Uh,
issue, George, might be insurance for the same reason. Insurance costs are very dynamic right now too.
They're crazy. Insurance costs are nuts.
Um,
My cars are getting older. Why's my insurance keep going up?
I need the money, George, to put some more skyscrapers.
Yeah,
That's right. They're antiques.
that's right. I wish they were worth antiques. They're not. Okay. Is that it for the town expenses? We're all set. Oh yeah, you asked about all right, yeah.
Where is insurance?
We'll get to it. It's on
Okay.
here.
All right.
It's down lower.
Yep, fine.
Okay, other general government. Not much here in terms of increases. You can see her note. Microsoft getting their share. And then the police chief, I took last year's number and I just bumped both these up by 10%. We'll see how that negotiation goes. And of course, we still need to review what we've decided, what's been presented by the police. But right now, this is what the chief presented to us, asking for that staffing to a full-time force, and her expenses. And then this is an open question, like we talked about earlier.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, because the line 118, it says expense equipment, which is where we think it is.
Yeah, so we might be double counting for those expenses.
Right. But I don't see, let's see, we called it maintenance. And the other line that we talked about was called repairs, and that didn't get in there, and that's a $5,000 line.
Yeah, that was the one for those like annual, no.
The maintenance is for the
Maintenance are those
annual.
like annual service things, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
The
service versus
inspections.
repair.
Right.
Two open items here. I think I mentioned these earlier. Ugh, I hate it when I do that. Sorry. Two open items here, lines 122 and 123. Hopefully Gabe she mentioned in an email that she's going to be working on those. I bumped them up by 3%. Just to be conservative. They haven't had huge increases year to year. So I did not use a big increase. Of course, everything's different this year. Interesting, on the tree warden, we transferred quite a bit of money, as everybody knows, $5,000. So really their budget for this year is $9,500, 9,477. And Gabe is taking that and running with it. And, seems high to me, but
Yeah.
potential area for cutting.
I'm gonna be talking to Dave about
Literally.
that. I didn't get a chance this week. But when we review his budget, we'll talk about it.
Okay, good to know. That's right, that was in the minutes from our last meeting. Okay, so education. The number that we talked about today, the budget that was presented from us today is that number right there. This is option one of the regional school, which is a $92,000 increase. And so, and as you can see, it's 5.5%. So obviously something we need to talk about more. And then, yeah, elementary transportation. I increased it by 5%. Somebody's got to research that. I don't know who has the answer. And then we talked about the debt exclusion override funding for the capital projects that we're paying at the school, at the region. Highway department, it's the budget. Yeah, now see, this. Yeah, so
No.
the notice here,
That's not under negotiation.
Already negotiated.
Yeah, we hired him. It's a new contract.
Yeah.
Oops. My ear.
okay. Let me just throw that up down here real quick. I'll fix my spelling some other day.
Yeah.
I also just double checked while we were talking that the maintenance line that you have in there for the fire department does include those two separate lines that we were talking about with Lenny.
Oh,
The yearly services and the repairs is 16,000. The total of those two lines on his budget was 16,400, and that's what seems to be in there. under
Oh,
maintenance.
so he gave you those details.
Yeah,
It looks like Gabe just put both of the
Yep.
sum of those two lines
Right,
into
right.
this maintenance line.
Yep,
instead of
that's it.
breaking it out.
That's true.
So, but if I heard you correctly, those are already included in
Yes. So
the
the number
18,600.
is correct because on 184 that line is 16,400, and the two lines that he discussed with us was 11,400 for yearly services and $5,000 for repairs. So I
Okay,
think
And
we're good on that.
and George just took out what we thought was maybe duplicating equipment costs.
right. Give me 1 second. I just want to make a note of that.
Yeah, and his budget did not, I mean, I think we already have said this, but it did not include the replacement tanks and
I just need to put these in here to balance my, because I'm keeping track of all the changes for Gabe. And I need to tell her about this, so I'm just. Yeah, okay, good, got it. All right, that's good to know. You just saved $5,000. Again, open items that Gabe is gonna look into. Oh, that's right, we already saw that. Where were we? Oh, yeah, we were at the school.
With the schools.
Yeah, oh, no, the superintendent, actually. So the highway superintendent asked Gabe to look at the contract. I think she knows that, yeah, on our contracts, many times, the first year of the contract is negotiated, and then it's stipulated in the contract that years 2 and 3 are going to increase at the same level as the,
Colas, okay.
yep, standard COLA, exactly.
Yep.
So that's probably what's going on here, but I'll ask her to double check. So yeah, so this is the budget that, the highway superintendent had presented to us. Including the snow removal, the salaries were increased by 2.95, but, he said keep materials level. And then this, I don't know, who knows what's going on with that? I mean, if Gabe doesn't, who does?
Right. And I talked to Gabe about it a little bit. I called it the gas problem at the fire station. She said, what gas problem at the fire station? And so here's the part of having a 20-hour interim fill in for one person that was doing 80 hours. So, so what's interesting to me is, does this get to fall off the radar of DEP? That'd be great.
Yeah, if nobody's
not.
talking to us.
Right. And the other way around, we're not talking to them. So, I think it's going to be picked up at some point. I'm not sure if we will, I think they would start talking to us if things got too far behind. That's wishful thinking.
I was gonna suggest that, I would call the engineers that worked on that for us, that put in that oversaw the wells and the testing. They would know what was going on with that, the order that was, because they got a CC at least on the order that from the State Department of,
The
All right.
LSP should know.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
who
we
in
should probably
town
get
would be
some
able to tell
information.
Gabe who they are?
Oh,
I think it's
gotta be
Teague
the-
and somebody.
No,
Yeah,
I should know
Iron
this.
Bond?
I can go in and show her where
It's
that.
not Ty and Bond.
I thought it was them, no?
I don't think it's Ty and Bond. It's
I think it is, or it's
they're in
Jeffrey.
Springfield.
O'Reilly, Talbot, and Oaken?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're not dealing with them
I'm gonna
now.
have to look through the minutes because it'll be in the minutes somewhere, I think.
But that is who we were working with originally with
Really?
yeah.
But I think we
Thank you,
watched.
Kathy.
We don't
Sure.
know.
And so would the highway chief, fire chief know?
No.
He's
No,
not
this
involved.
happened
Okay.
before.
He had to dance around to allow things to happen, but he's not driving the thing.
What's the name of the company?
I believe it's Tigan Bond and it's Jeffrey Arps, but I'm not sure. I'll go and talk to Gabe to show her where that information is in the office.
Okay, that's great, Susie.
That'd be great.
Yeah, and then there's the PFAS mitigation, which, to be determined. I don't know when and how and why, but,
So I have a question about that. Would we go ahead and budget the interest on the debt on a as what should be on a line? I mean,
that would go in debt service.
okay, so it's not there yet and we might do that.
We'll
Isn't it
only put it in there
interest-free
when we know
loan?
that we have to pay it.
Isn't
So
it?
I don't know when the bond, when the payments start.
So that'd be a question for Ryan, right?
Yes,
I-
yes.
I think that
Payments.
the loan is interest-free and the
No,
payments deferred. No.
no,
Part of
there's
it is, I think.
I thought it was, but still, the principal has to be in the debt service.
But payments were deferred, so I don't know to when.
right.
Well, either
So
way, we should find out.
Yeah.
I'll ask Ryan what they know about that, because it was a process of getting a letter and getting the bonds, and he was looking for that, and I know that part went forward. So I'll ask him about that.
Yeah, and Susie, we really should talk to him about the whole debt situation, because I am concerned that if bond counsel, because interest rates aren't coming down, bond counsel says you should wait another year. We've got these 3 items that are getting old, and they're going to soak up all our debt service, and we're delaying them is just going to not give us flexibility for other capital purchases. Now, the good news is we've been building up capital stabilization because we haven't had debt service, but still, I that's a concern of mine.
I'll tell him that, and then you two should talk.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I just noticed that she didn't put anything in for water quality. Does anybody know what this is about?
Is that the testing?
It's not the PFAS.
I think, George,
What line are you on?
it was the wells that we had.
Oh, yeah, 163, Susie. Oh, yeah, you think that's done?
I think it's done, yeah. I don't even know if they're still being monitored for level and water quality, but we had 5 test wells, or
Oh, yeah.
deep and 3 shallow.
Is that
That's
something
right.
I could ask Al Werner?
Yes.
Yeah, he'd know
Yes.
about it.
That, yeah,
Oh, I didn't think that was water quality. Al
it was
Warner
not.
go-
It was water quantity.
Yes, right. It was to monitor the water table.
Yeah, for groundwater.
I think, is it possible it's that situation we had by the highway department a few years ago? Remember, we had a
Yeah,
neighbor with a well that was contaminated?
Right.
We drilled them a new well.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this was related to that.
Maybe.
This is where we need to invite Becky to a meeting.
Pay her. We need to pay her to consult.
She can volunteer. She's a citizen of the town.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. All right, looks like Gabe made a decision here, fine. Like I said, we'll have to research this, but it looks like the actual spend in 24 was this, we budgeted it there. I don't know if we spent any this year, but that's an open item. Is everybody okay with this veterans benefits? I think, oh yeah, oops.
Yeah, we talked about
Yeah, we
that.
talked to Ryan about that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That was a good point. All right, moving on. Library budget that was submitted. Debt service is wide open.
Mm.
It comes in every year, but it also is in revenues. And whatever we put here, we put in revenues. So this doesn't count towards debt service. Ryan told us 2,000 in interest on short-term notes. But as far as, sorry. As far as long-term financing goes, we've got these three items that we have been kicking the can down the road on.
Oh, okay.
And so that's the conversation that I would like to have with Ryan. Then Gabe had put 180 in here because that's what she was told by FERCog or whoever FRR is. I brought it back up to last year's because that's what we've been spending. In fact, this year we've also spent substantial portion of the 270. So, the letter she has is 180, 927. I don't believe it.
Yeah, no. Somebody might have died. No.
Wow, they were getting a lot of money. Well, I guess, I don't know. I thought with this, sorry, I'm getting serious. I missed the joke. I think we don't fund pay as you go for people as they retire. I think it's funding a fund that retirements are paid out of.
Right.
Kind of like what we're trying to do with OPEB. So again, like I said earlier, Ryan told us 598 for insurance. I'm sorry, for health insurance. Gabe put in
He told us.
624. I brought it back to 598. She was at that meeting and said, yeah, 598 is a good number. 15% is right. So I don't know why she changed it, but I do have it on the list of things to ask her. And then we talked about the town buildings maintenance. And then I put back the 112, 695, and this number will decrease as we add to debt service.
I just
And
double
there-
checked the treasurer's budget, which I'm sure you had already done, George, but the number I'm seeing there is 598 as well.
Yeah.
So I think that is the right number.
So we're only
So-
$320,000 short.
That is our deficit.
Eh.
Good response.
Ugh.
Yeah,
Ouch.
yeah, that's a big one.
Hmm.
When I first saw it, I'm like, okay, let's see what revenues look like. And then I realized she had put in the 2.5 and the new growth. It's like, oh no.
But the new growth is a pretty conservative number, right? I mean,
That is my sense, yes.
Yes, no, these are
Um,
conservative numbers.
I don't think it's $300,000 worth of new growth, though.
no, for sure.
So I'm going to filter on all the items that are over $10,000 in the difference column. And you can see where the big items are. And the biggest increases, of course, are at the school. 220 between the two of them.
And they're a
And then
little
the
less
seven-
than last year's increases.
I'm sorry?
They're less than last year's increases, those two items.
That's right. Last year was 6%.
And the
And the
other one was
regional.
almost 6%.
Okay.
Right.
Yep. And so 220, I'm clicking on that. I'm also clicking on 78. That's the insurance.
Mhm.
And those two things combined are $298,000.
All right.
That's the lion's share of the overage. And of course, we have, the salary line for the town administrator, the administrative assistant, and the chief look like they're probably going to go up more than the standard 3%.
That would be my
So-
sense.
This is just a summary of kind of where the big things are.
Yeah, we should change that line item for administrative secretary to administrative assistant.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Because it's a different job.
Well, no,
Yeah, there's got to be a conversation with there's got to be a conversation with the town accountant to do that on the books.
Okay. And have
I
we
don't know how
hired
that
anybody?
goes.
Have we hired anybody into that position?
The advertisement just went out for that.
Okay.
So I highlighted in blues the lines that have the big increases. With the exception of school, I just highlighted the total school. Excuse me. So that's the story.
All right.
It's a starting.
Yeah. George, this is a huge amount of work. I'm really grateful that you did this. And I think, you know, I'm going to try to take some time also just to look at the department. I'm sure you did this, but I think it's a good idea to just have a second person just look at all of the department budgets that we've been
Yeah.
reviewing, just to make sure that those numbers
Well,
being in are consistent.
Yeah, well, the first thing I'd like to say, and I know I've said in the past, is, you know, the liaisons should look at the budgets for their towns and make sure they're entered properly.
Yes.
And of course, I think everybody should look at it. I mean, you can't trust one person to do all this. It's just too much.
Not only that, you can't trust one volunteer. Okay. These are all volunteer hours and volunteer thinking, and that's the process.
Well, I'm retired and I have been working on the budget. You know, I've been involved in the budget for quite a long time. So I'm happy to help. It makes sense that I do. So, and I think, you know, Gabe's done a great job. She took this very far.
Yeah.
She's coming in here very green. She certainly understands how it all works, but she doesn't know, you know, this is a different environment. So,
Yeah.
but we definitely have a challenge on our hands.
Yeah. So I think, Bob, I see your hand up. Just before we get to you, I think we should. It's getting fairly late, so I think what we should do is we should all sort of think about this gap number, see what happens to it after Saturday's Four Towns meeting, and then I think we should kind of start tossing around some ideas at our next meeting about how to address that. What are some of the different strategies? Do we want to utilize any free cash? If so, for which line? All of the, I think we need to like start having that discussion.
Yeah, the sped, that's where we applied a lot of it last year.
Yeah. Bob.
I just want to say very briefly, one of the ways to address a budget gap like this is to look at the department's request and to see if that is something we want to support or not. I think we made an assumption for purposes of this document that we accepted the request as written. That's not necessarily what the most prudential thing to do is. So we should all look at it if we have time. I certainly will, and see if I can justify the support of all the different requests from the town and whether they reflect a policy which we presumably is still have, which is that of level services. So, you know, the taxpayer has to be brought into consideration in this too. It's not just a matter of spending whatever is requested. It's a matter of budgeting what resources are available.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll certainly, we'll have a process where any FinCom member can identify a budget line here that they want to discuss and, you know, make a case one way or the other. So we'll certainly make sure that that kind of discussion happens. All right.
I have one question. I would want, going into Saturday, if we said to say, we sat there and said, oh, well, right now we're wrestling with a $320,000 hole. That means nothing to towns that have bigger budgets. So and this percentage number doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know how to read that, but I guess that's the kind of, we need a way to put a handle on it.
Well, I mean, I think one thing we can say, right, is that our current assumptions, I mean, maybe the more meaningful number is that we have, at this point right now, we are projecting a 5.72% increase in our total operating expenses. That's a big number. You know, I agree, the $323,000 gap is not a number that's particularly meaningful for other towns because the scale of everything is so different. But as a percentage, increase, 5.7% is a big number. It's bigger than Amherst is contemplating. And I think that kind of communicates the struggle, the challenge that we have, right?
And I imagine all the other towns are going to come to the meeting Saturday with a very similar
Yes.
struggle.
Yes.
We're not alone.
Yeah. I think the outlier, though, quite honestly, is going to be Amherst because they at least in terms of their kind of rhetoric, they really do have this like hard and fast kind of. They talk about this kind of hard and fast guideline that they apply across all their department, all their units, and sometime eventually they kind of. But so I'm sure whatever their current assumption is right now about what their overall budget is going to look like, I bet it is not a 5.7% increase.
One quick question, AJ, qualifier to what you said, if you're going to be mentioning a 5.72 increase on our expenses, you're going to note that includes option 1
Yes.
of the most recent. Okay.
Yes. Good point. Yeah.
Right.
So, I think we should talk about this now. So I'm gonna, unless there were any questions for George before we move on. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna pull up. I sent this around, I think yesterday. Let's see, where's that?
Letter.
The letter
Not
from
the
the
letter.
to the town council.
But the options that Shannon
Oh yeah.
has had shared with us, and she's given me a deadline of tomorrow to ask for any other kind of information or models that we want to have her pull together before Saturday's meeting. But maybe I'll just briefly kind of walk through this really quickly. So again, this was prepared by Shannon, the finance director for the district. It includes essentially 5 different budget models that I think presumably they're going to share at Saturday's meeting and ask for feedback on. And it starts from kind of a baseline model, which is this one right here, which basically assumes that the budget gets fully funded, so no cuts at all, and the modified statutory method is applied to determine each town's assessment. So again, I don't think anybody's contemplating this as a budget that is going to be, and she didn't even describe it as one of the options. It's more like the baseline to have in the back of her head. So this would, if we were to fully fund the budget and apply modified statutory, we'd be looking at a 12% increase. All right, so now that brings us to our, like the first of the different sort of models. So this one here is one that applies the statutory method, the modified statutory method, after a total of $1.254 million are cut from the budget. And that number is the amount of cuts required to keep Amherst's increase at 3% using the modified statutory method. Okay, so that's what this model is.
How much are the cuts? Oh, 1,254. Okay.
Yeah, 1,254. So in this model, again, we're doing modified statutory where Amherst, it's being sort of driven by capping Amherst at a 3% increase. That would result in a 5.5% increase for us. This is the number that George plugged in preliminarily to our budget. It's an increase of $91,511 for Shutesbury. And again, and it's a 5.5% increase.
Yeah.
Okay. Next model all right, is a kind of hybrid sort of method that, let's see, I don't remember now. So again, it holds Amherst at 3%. But what it does is she's calling it sort of helps Leverett and Pelham. Well, I guess it's really more that it helps. Yeah, it helps both those towns by, okay, I'm going to try to say this. It's really, I finally figured it out today. What she did was she said she took the last year's approach of, when we did a 4% guardrail, if we did something like that, okay, that results in Amherst paying 81% of the total assessment versus what the 79.9% that the modified statutory method would have them paying, right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically what she did was she said, if since Amherst is already talking about increasing their assessment by 3%, right? That was their sort of starting position. Let me think about this first. I just had this earlier today. Okay. Right. Okay. So, wait a second. I just have this. Okay. Yeah. So what this does is it helps actually Pelham, Leverett, and Shutesbury by essentially increasing the deficit to $1.4 million. So the amount of cuts now is 1.4 million as opposed to 1.2 million. It still holds Amherst at 3%, but then it basically applies all of the sort of the savings by increasing the total amount of cuts to each of the three towns. So essentially what this leaves us at is a $50,000 increase, or basically 3% for us as well. That's kind of the bottom line. This does obviously have a bigger amount of cuts required. Again, it's 1.4 million as opposed to 1.2 million. Okay. Option 3 applies the modified statutory method. This time, it assumes that Amherst can increase by 4%. So the amount of cuts required then gets reduced to just 1 million as opposed to 1.2 million. Okay. But again, applies the modified statutory method to everybody based on fixing Amherst's increase at 4%. So this would result in a $111,000 increase for Shutesbury, or 6.71% increase. Okay.
What was
So
that
this-
percentage again?
Sorry?
What was the percentage again?
Percentage change is 6.71%.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. This is the only model that Shannon shared in this document that has us at a higher assessment than the number George has already plugged into our budget. So for what it's worth. Okay. By about $20,000. Yeah. Okay.
She didn't use that same method and bumping Amherst up to 5%.
No.
And that would shift
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So if she did that, what it would mean is,
Another percent.
larger assessments for the other three towns,
Uh-huh.
but a significantly reduced amount of cuts required.
Right.
That's what that would do.
It's the
Okay.
lowest cut too.
Yeah, lowest.
Right. Okay. So now we've got one of these hybrid methods that she's discussed or presented. And this one, this is a weird one. It basically, it assumes Amherst is increasing 4% and then uses that their
Savings.
savings essentially and applies it to the other three towns, which actually would result in a decrease in our
That's not gonna fly.
That's not going to happen.
It's not.
That's not gonna
But
come.
it would reduce our assessment by $12,493. Okay.
So it's the same as option 2, except for that was with 3% for Amherst, and this
Yeah.
one is with 4% for Amherst.
Yes.
And otherwise, everything trickles down the same way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And it's a $1.4 million cut.
Correct.
Both are.
Yep. 2 and 4 are $1.4 million cuts. And actually the last one we're going to look at,
5 too.
option 5.
Five
is- I
too,
think
right.
so. Yeah. Okay. And so, all right, this one, okay, this one is essentially her attempt to remedy what we saw in the problem with the last model, which is that we're actually getting a cut in our assessment, and it bumps us to 2.45%, and it essentially applies that savings to help Pelham and Leverett.
Mhm.
But again, this is the same. It's going to have the same challenge, which is that it's a big $1.4 million
Yeah.
cut for the region. All right.
Could you describe that one more time just for the notes? How did you describe that?
So this essentially builds off of option 4, but it says since under option 4, Shutesbury is actually not increasing our assessment, but actually decreasing it. It says it essentially bumps us to 2.45%. This morning I knew why, and now it's totally escaping me at this moment how she got to that particular, but it essentially bumps us up to 2.45%, keeps Amherst at 4%, but uses that money that is now being applied to Shutesbury and applies that to Pelham and Leverett.
So that's a modified.
Yeah.
Modified.
Yeah, she's using the term hybrid for 3 of these budget.
It's a mutant hybrid.
Yeah.
It's a mutant hybrid.
So I found
She
that
did a lot of
summary
work.
page at the end, the next page. I found that helpful in
Yes.
terms of
Yes.
looking at.
Yeah.
So this is right. So these are the end results for each town under these 5 different options.
It's too bad. Yeah, it'd be nice to have those in percent increases, but that's,
Yeah.
Well, the
I mean,
percents are on the pages. They
Yeah.
just didn't put the dollar values on all the pages. And
that's right.
So I have them. I mean, if you have a question about, like, I know I can tell you right now because I wrote them down. For Shutesbury, option 1 is a 5.53% increase. Option 2 is a 3.04% increase. Option 3 is a 6.71% increase. Option 4 is a 0.76% decrease. And then option 5 is a 2.45% increase.
And which of those options are the $1.4 million dollar deficit? It's
Um,
2.
So right here, it says it 2,
Oh, yeah. There
4,
it
and
is.
5.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Can I
Gonna be
say something, AJ?
yeah, please, Bob, go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to say, I have a very, very strong view that we should stick with the modified statutory method. And the reason is twofold. One, we worked hard because we thought this was the most equitable, fair way to distribute the cost of education down there. And 2, the further we go with these modified methods and these hybrid methods, not the modified, the hybrid methods. The further we get away from the real assessment that would be indicated by our modified statutory method, and the further behind we get, and the more difficult it will be to reestablish it. So we should just do it now and decide what budget we're funding. I would support any of the three options where we use the modified statutory method. I don't like some of the increases that are
Two
associated
options.
with that. But
Two options, Bob. It's option 1 and option 3 are straight statutory, modified statutory method options. The other three
Option-
are these hybrid methods.
option 1 and option 2 is a modified statutory with this
No, option
line
2,
there. That's
option 2, option 2 is a hybrid model.
But down here it says modified scenario with the percentages, but it's still a 3% for Amherst, but maintaining the percentages. But I think I could support that. It's closer to the statutory. And then option 3, and option 3 has the lowest cut of the three options, and it has I think 6.71%. But really, that's the cost of us funding the budget. If we decide to support that level of budgeting, we should support, in my opinion, we should support an increase in our spending and get on the even keel that we are trying to get on with allocations and pay the price for supporting that to the region. I don't know if that budget with $1 million cut will be acceptable to the other towns, but I would support us going along with whatever budget we decide as a region to support. Let's allocate the expense fairly. That is the modified statutory method.
All right, Bob, I think I'm thinking in a similar way to you. I think we should leave, like, the purpose of these hybrid models are really to help Pelham and Leverett. So let's leave it to them to advocate for them. If they, like, I don't think we need to take that position. And so I tend to agree that option 1 and option 3 are the ones that we ought to contemplate. I think, we've already got option 1 plugged in. I guess the question I have is, do we, having just looked at our total, the gap of using our current assumptions, do we think we could support option 3, which would really help to reduce the amount of cuts required for the region, but would bump us up to what did I say, a 6.7%?
6.71% or something.
Susie.
So I was trying to find like some ballpark ideas, and for me, 1.4 million is too big a cut. I could see going for 1.25 million as a cut, but I also could see in option 1 to change Amherst's percentage, not 3%, but suggested it be 3.5%. I think they don't need to be just choosing between 3 and 4. The problem with 3 is it's Amherst at 4. So if we went with option 1 and Amherst went to 3.5 instead of 3, then either that savings could be applied to reducing the cut from 1.25, or it could be applied to the small towns who all are paying more than 3%, for 3.5%. And so we could sort of justify where we're at in that suggestion. And I bringing this up because if we want to talk about it, we need to send it in to Shannon tomorrow. And there's one other piece I want to say, which is I checked into whether the region is calling their rural aid in their revenue. And the answer I got is no, they are not. But we pressed our local school to include rural aid as a revenue that they're using. And I think we can press the region to do that. And if they put that money in, it could go towards making our share less or making the cut to the budget less.
You know what their amount for FY25 was?
Yeah, I asked, does the regional school receive any rural aid funding? I see on the chart Amherst Pelham listed at 248,515. And she said, we do receive RSA at the region. Over the past few years, it was once rounded at 80 to 90K. They have slowly increased it, but it's always a question as to what it'll be next year, depending on the governor's budget, blah, blah, blah. She never goes back to give that number. It's clearly more than 80 or 90 because it's increased over time. The chart that you can look at, rural aid distribution for FY25 said 248,515. So I just feel like the rationale is, yes, the state is a very unreliable dance partner, but we pushed our local town to do that, to use that revenue in their calculations. And yep, nobody likes to get cut at the end, but I feel like they need to come up with something. It's not in any of the numbers.
Yeah, so they don't, so it's not in any of these, it's not buried in any of these revenue.
No. I also asked her to check the interest revenue, which has been flat since 2000. I know 2004 was 32,000. I don't know that number should be flat. People's interest revenue has been doing better. And she agreed that she should look into this with the treasurer.
Got it. Okay. So here's my feedback on like whether we should ask Shannon to put together a new model that splits the difference between 1 and 3 by assigning Amherst a 3.5% increase. Is, you know, my feeling is that Amherst should figure out a way to support a 4% increase. And I know that they're gonna fight and they're gonna present arguments Saturday, but like every other community in this district is contemplating increases that are significantly higher than, and I know Amherst always likes to point out the ways in which their sort of circumstances are different or their community is substantially different, but I never find them particularly persuasive, those arguments.
Each community is unique.
Yeah. And, the school committee, as you saw from that letter, which it's a draft, but, they really are pushing pretty aggressively, Amherst to not kind of fall back on this idea of a 3%. So I think my instinct is I'm sort of reluctant to even give Amherst that little wiggle room of 0.5%. But I don't know. That's just my opinion. Bob?
Yeah, I just want to somewhat expand and echo what you're saying, AJ. That is, I think we have no power, or nor should we even contemplate influencing Amherst and how much they're willing to pay. They're going to be under a lot of pressure from their own community, from the school committee, and from members of various boards to spend more. And they're not going to listen to us at all. So I think that this 3.5% might very well organically come up Saturday at the meeting as a compromise, because Amherst is going to come out and say 3. And then someone's going to demand 4. And then we're going to play the usual back and forth. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if this compromise emerged from the meeting, but I don't think we can make it happen. It's going to come out of the interaction between Amherst and its taxpayers and its stakeholders in the school. So, and we're still small potatoes compared to them. There's no way around that.
Where's the timeline? Do you think we're going to have, this is February. Do you think there's going to be another negotiating discussion, or what's going to happen?
I'm I mean, I'm sure that the superintendent and the school committee wants to come out of this meeting on Saturday with a model, like, and I think they're gonna take, look, I'm not so naive to think that we're gonna talk for 2 hours on Saturday and we're all gonna agree, yeah, option 3 is, is the one, let's move forward. That's not gonna happen probably, but I think they're gonna get a bunch of feedback, and I think they're gonna take that feedback into account, and they're gonna build a budget. And they're gonna do kind of like what they did last year, which is sort of build a budget and vote on it and say, this is, we did the best we could to reconcile the different feedback we heard from different towns, and this is where we land. But so I don't think there's going to be another Four Towns meeting after this one. At least maybe that's not true, but I think they're gonna. I think the school committee is going to put together a budget, and they're going to move forward with it, and they're going to say, this is our budget that we intend to vote on. And maybe at that point there'll be a Four Towns meeting, but no.
But hopefully we don't end up with the same kind of surprise we had last year,
Yeah, right.
because that really screwed everybody up.
Well, yeah, and I'm concerned about it because, I think I mentioned at our last meeting some preliminary suggestions they made about what a $1.2 million cut is going to mean for the district. And, it was 24 positions. And only 5 of those were central office positions.
Mhm.
19 of them were 14 of them were instructional staff, 8 teachers, 6 paras, and then there were 5 clerical. So people are gonna hear that, and it's gonna be a lot of the same voices, the same concerns as last year. So, but
Well, we saw the letter from the Amherst Regional School to the town council. So you can see the pressure that they're going to be under.
Susie.
So I would like to have some bottom lines for us. And one is that I would not endorse a cut larger than 1.25. And I also would endorse that they go back and look at their revenue picture and include rural aid. And I think if we don't say those things, I think those are our things to say. I think we could say those.
Yeah, I agree. Now the question then becomes, would we support, I think it's highly unlikely, but would we support option 3 as it's laid out here? Is that too big? Is that too large an increase for us to
See where it's
be
at.
able to endorse at this point right now?
So, yeah, well, look at where we are.
20 more K.
Our deficit was what again? 320?
320,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that was
Five-
using the $91,000 increase.
So it'd be another 20.
Option 1.
It's a 5% increase.
Mhm.
Amherst is capping themselves at 3.
So under option 3, Amherst would increase by 4%.
That's right.
Bob?
I just think, I don't know, I personally, depending on what happens on Saturday, I'd be prepared to support that. I know that it's going to put a lot of pressure on our town and our budgeting process. I'm concerned, like April is, that from the tone of the letter that was written to the town council, was kind of very passionate and very sort of hard line, it seemed to me. So if we go ahead and support something like option 3, and then we find we're in a fix still, that would be extremely upsetting to me, because that's a hard lift for us to get to fund that with our budget concerns that we all know about. So again, I would rather hold off on that and keep that in our vest, but support option one openly, and also raise our concerns about the cuts. So again, my main thing is to not see us slide into one of these hybrid things and get away from the statutory. Because whatever budget we decide on as a region, I think we are obligated to support it, you know?
Susie?
I have a problem with the idea that these are 5 options. And if we don't talk about it, maybe in what we send them tomorrow, the option that Amherst goes to 3.5, then I don't know that they will go outside these options. These are the options that are sitting on the table. I feel like we could, not because of how we want to negotiate with Amherst, but the way if the choices seem to be these 5, I'm afraid they're only going to see these 5. And I don't think that's a great thing, because option 1 is only Amherst at 3%, and option 3 is Amherst at 4%, right? Yeah.
Yes, correct.
So I just feel like it's still worthwhile putting out in our letter tomorrow that option 1 has the largest amount of cut we would tolerate, and we suggest that there's another option, that Amherst goes between 3 and 4, and we're using the statutory. That's our other bottom line.
All right. Any other thoughts? So here's what I'm hearing is I think I'm hearing general support for option 1 with an important caveat that Susie makes. And Susie, I think I'm going to count on you on Saturday to actually raise this question, which is that we think there may be an option to reduce the amount of cuts required by applying rural aid support to the budget. But otherwise, we could endorse, or I guess we can communicate that we are amenable, that option 1 is amenable to our town. So that's 1. Sounds like there's not enthusiasm at this point in us coming out and saying we would be willing to support option 3. That's potentially a back pocket thing, but that's not something we're prepared to communicate right now. And then there's an idea that Susie has raised, which is that we ask Shannon to produce a 6th option, which applies the statutory method and pins Amherst to a 3.5% increase. Those are the sort of 3 kind of concepts.
And AJ, we are against the hybrid and the mutant hybrid.
Yeah.
Well,
No
Correct.
mutants. We don't want
no mutant
mutants.
hybrid,
No
and we
mutants.
don't support anything that's 1.4 million.
Yeah, thank you. That's an important point too. I think nobody has advocated for an option that would result in the larger than $1.25 million deficit or cut. Yes, so I think that's another position that we can take. So just want to test that with everybody. Does anybody have a different opinion about those ideas?
So I'm just going to go over real quick from the minutes. So we support option 1.
Mm-hmm.
We would like rural aid to be calculated and applied to some extent.
Yes.
Shutesbury,
And,
we don't.
specifically used to further reduce the amount of cuts required, right?
Thank you. Yep, to reduce cuts. And then Shutesbury does not support the use of a hybrid method, does not support any methods that cut or cutting 1.4 million. And then the final thing was, we would like,
Yeah, so on this last point, I think I just want to see, are folks keen on me asking Shannon to produce an option 5 that does this this thing where we have
Yeah.
Amherst at a 3.5% increase?
so basically option 1 using 3.5.
Yeah. It's kind of splitting the difference between option 1 and 3, but yeah.
Yeah.
Any pushback on that? Because I will go ahead and send Shannon an email tomorrow.
And maybe another piece to say in the minutes is our percentages for 1 and 3 are way over 4%. Okay.
Yeah.
And so somehow their magic 4 and everybody else needs to go along I just think we should note what our percentages are as
Yeah.
as being over 4.
And not
Under every
emphasize,
method but one, right?
yeah,
No,
and not say the
one is 5.5.
No, everyone except for option 4, I think it was.
Yeah, but we're not talking about 4 or 5 or 2. Those are hybrids and we're not talking those.
But your point is, all of those methods, I'm not looking at the numbers, all those methods, every method amounts to a greater than, what did you say, 4% increase for Shutesbury, with the exception of one method.
Well, only the ones that we're endorsing.
Yeah, so I think the way to say it, George, is that all of the methods that we're supporting result in.
Oh, got it. That's the point. Yeah,
significantly
okay,
lower-
result in an increase of greater than 4%.
Yeah.
Got it. I see what you're saying. Okay, got it. I can definitely get that in the minutes.
Bob?
Just FYI, the reason that we could see these numbers the way they are laid out is because we had the guardrails in place, and that made Amherst pay more than its share under the statutory method. So now all the other towns using the statutory method pay more than Amherst, because that's the way the math works.
Yeah.
So if we can reestablish the statutory method, whatever the increase is, we'll have a more fair distribution, and there won't be these kinds of jumps
Yeah.
we're going to see this year. So just FYI for that.
Yeah, and I think we should take as a win that none of the options being presented here do what was done last year, which is apply a blanket increase to all 4 communities. So even these hybrid guardrail things, they're all differentiating, increases in some way that tie back to statutory method. So so that is a win. I think we've kind of clearly moved beyond that.
Let's hope so.
So
George?
one thing I was thinking about, I think something Bob said made me think of it, and I have been thinking, one thing that would be really helpful, I know it's hard for the region to do, but I thought in the first meeting they actually did some long range planning and they showed some long-term impacts.
Yeah.
That would be, I understand that there's a lot of work that the finance director is doing, and that would be asking for a lot. But I'll tell you, having an idea of what all these increases mean for us in the future years would be really helpful.
Yeah, I can mention it. Yeah.
But because
It's a pipe dream, I know.
in that letter, they were trying to stay away from,
And they were sort of pushing back from that. Yeah.
but actually they were pushing back from limitations. They weren't staying back from the reality.
Yeah, I mean, last year, yeah, all right.
Another thing that I was kind of amazed by in that letter, and I don't think I realized it, is that Amherst, when they build their budget, they plan for a 5% surplus. Like,
yes.
that's not something that we do. We don't make a budget and assume. I mean, we have a surplus sometimes because we have certain lines that are underspent, but those are because of vacancies and whatever. It's not like we go into the budget and say, okay, let's now assume a 5% surplus, a plan for a 5% surplus.
Well, I give them credit for that because I've always thought it's kind of absurd the way the state of Massachusetts has town building free cash. It's basically serendipity. We build a budget and we hope that people don't overspend, and we'll have some cash to help us with things in the future.
Yeah.
I give them
Wonder if
credit for
they're-
trying.
I wonder if they're counting their rural aid in that 5%.
Yeah,
Good
there you
But
go.
people got a lot of heat for all the excess that was building up, so like that money should be accounted for.
Yeah, and they clearly have used it to address, big kind of capital issues. Like,
Yes.
imagine we did that. And like we've got, we've had some big capital expenses. Imagine we planned every year, built into our budget, a surplus that we then knew we could apply to these projects. Like,
I think I also agree with the point that if Amherst is planning on building in a 5% increase in cash, they're getting more than 5%.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be unspent lines. There always
Mm,
are. I mean,
right.
that's how
Good
the towns
point.
generate cash. So they're really padding their free cash by doing that.
That's a good point, right? Yeah, because if they're planning for 5%, then they're gonna, maybe they have some lines that overspend, but they're probably gonna have a lot more lines that underspend.
Yeah, well, that's why they got a FinCom reserve.
Right. Okay, I think I've got a kind of clear direction from you all. Susie, did you?
Yeah, the other
Yeah.
thing I thought that was revealed in that letter is the whole way where people's health insurance is placed and comparing the town's budget to the school's budget and where it's like, really? That's apples and oranges. And if you didn't already know that,
Mhm.
then you got to get a new finance director. Because we're busy trying to manage our ship, it just struck me that letter. I'm counting on it being honest and true. There's some
Mhm.
stuff they do need to straighten out, but anyways,
Well,
we have a
it-
plan.
It makes sense that they can calculate the health insurance for the staff in the building and charge that through the school budget. If Northampton doesn't do that, I don't know if they're a regional school or not, but that's not relevant. I think the way they're doing it in Amherst is probably more accurate, more
Well, what
correct.
they were saying is that Amherst tries to keep the four quadrants of their budget rising up at the same rate. But the Amherst town health insurance isn't in the town quadrant. It's in something called miscellaneous. That's what I read out of that.
Oh, I
And
see.
it's like, yeah, you guys got this idea, everything has to rise the same. I don't see that as a
Well,
lot.
they challenged that notion in the letter too, didn't they?
Yeah, right. And I would challenge it too, especially if
Yeah,
their
there's no
accounting's a little
question.
funny.
Right.
But anyways, I think if we have our pieces, then AJ, are you prepared to send that to them tomorrow?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna send an email tomorrow, just just based on kind of these 4 or 5 points that sounds like we have a consensus on.
It certainly will be an interesting morning.
Yes. So everybody got, for some reason, I think I had it on my calendar initially as 9:30, but everybody saw it's a 9 o'clock start time. So
Yeah, that's SOP, right?
yeah, yeah,
And the other thing you can do is thank them for getting this information to us before the meeting
Yeah.
in copies that we can read. I mean, don't-
Shannon did a great job. She really did a great job.
yeah. I will do that. And I did post a meeting. I think the select board is going to need to do that. I'm going to talk to Gabe about that tomorrow. I think they're going to need to post a meeting, assuming. Oh, I know Rita's not there, but
they might have missed it because it's
I think-
48 hours before 9 o'clock on Saturday.
I
Well,
thought for
today's
some-
Tuesday.
Yeah, I think.
Oh,
they're-
yeah, sorry.
I think they got time.
I think they're
Don't
gonna
tell,
do it tomorrow
don't
or
tell
Thursday.
Susie.
I thought it was Wednesday
Yeah,
already.
this is another retired person.
Well, this
What time is
meeting
it
has
again?
brought us to Wednesday. It feels like we're at Wednesday.
AJ, you said you're gonna talk to Gabe in the morning?
Yeah,
Would you let her know that I'll send her the budget back? But I
sure.
may not do it first thing because I got to make some changes to it, but I'll definitely send it to her. She can expect it pretty early in the day.
Okay, I'll let her know.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. It's past 9, so I'm gonna assume that there's no other business for us to discuss,
Ooh.
and I'll make a motion to adjourn our meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Mm.
George?
Arvidas, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Celtics
aye.
versus Cleveland.
Yep.
And Salvador, I.
And Stein, aye.
Thank you all.
All right. Thanks
See
for
you
hanging in there,
Saturday.
guys.
It's a great meeting.
See you on
guys.
Saturday.
We'll see you all on
Yep,
Saturday.
thanks.
Okay. Bye.
Unless there's snow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.